My name is Lina. I'm 32 years old. And for most of my life, I've been the invisible one in my family. My sister Emma, 3 years older, has always been the perfect daughter. She's beautiful, gracious, and carries that effortless charm that makes people stop and listen. I, on the other hand, have always been the one in the background, dressed in simple clothes, face bare of makeup, and head buried in work that no one ever asked about. I live in a small town about an hour's drive from Seattle. Every morning, I brew a cup of dark espresso, check the weather, and then walk a block to my office, the headquarters of the biotech company I co-founded, after clawing my way back from a failed first venture that nearly broke me. That failure is a scar I still carry. And in my family's eyes, it was proof that I would never measure up to Emma. At home, Emma was the one they bragged about. Emma's getting engaged soon, they'd say. Or, Emma's fiancé is a real catch. When they spoke about me, it was in passing like an afterthought. Oh, Lina. She's doing something in biotech. They'd mumble, their voices trailing off. The failed startup years ago. To them, that was all I'd ever be. But I didn't let that stop me. I rebuilt myself. I poured my soul into the new company. Working late into the night with 3 college friends who believed in me even when my family didn't. We signed our first major contract in the middle of winter. In a cramped office that smelled of old coffee and fresh possibility. Slowly, I started to see what I was capable of. Even if my family didn't. I never expected them to notice. I never expected to matter. But when Emma announced her engagement, and the family began planning her perfect day, I still held on to a small hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd be seen. That they'd look at me, not as the sister who failed once, but as someone who had finally found her place. I didn't want the spotlight. I just wanted to stand in the same room without feeling like I was taking up space that didn't belong to me. I never guessed that the day Emma got engaged would be the day I realized just how far I was willing to go to protect the quiet strength I'd fought so hard to build. The call from my father came on a Wednesday morning. The day after I had finally decided to take a few days off work to attend Emma's engagement party. I remember the sky was pale and overcast. The kind of morning that felt like it was holding its breath. I was standing by the window, coffee cup warm in my hand, when the phone rang. "Dad," I answered, trying to sound casual, like this was just another normal conversation. He didn't bother with greetings. There was a pause, long enough to make my heart tighten. Then he cleared his throat. "Lina, about this weekend," he said, his voice low and careful. "It might be best if you didn't come." I froze, my mind stuttering for a moment. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though deep down, I already knew. "It's Emma's big day," he continued, almost like he was reading from a script. "She's bringing Liam Hayes, a financial executive. Very well spoken. Very polished. We just want everything to go smoothly." I gripped the phone tighter. The ceramic of my mug suddenly cool against my palm. "You think I'll make it not go smoothly?" My voice was quiet, measured, but I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. He sighed, the sound heavy with something I couldn't quite name. "Lina, you know how these things are. Everyone will be comparing. Your work, it's hard to explain. We don't want any awkward questions. We don't want to make Emma uncomfortable." In that moment, all the air seemed to leave the room. My father didn't say he was ashamed of me, but he didn't have to. The message was clear. My life, my job, my very existence, it was inconvenient. I thought of the years I had spent trying to prove myself after my first company failed. I remembered the long nights, the endless hours of building something new from the rubble of my first collapse. But to him, none of it mattered. To him, I was still the daughter who had once failed. The daughter who didn't belong. He swallowed hard. forcing the words out. "So you're saying I shouldn't come because I embarrass you?" He didn't deny it. His silence was louder than any answer he could have given. And then he said the words that would echo in my mind for days. "If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father." He hung up before I could say anything else. I stood there in my living room, staring out at the pale sky. The phone still warm in my hand. My coffee had gone cold. My chest felt tight, like the weight of those words had settled into my bones. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. Just hollow, like a piece of me had been carved out and left to freeze in the early spring air. For the first time, I realized the truth. I wasn't the daughter they wanted. I was just the one they needed when there was a bill to be paid or a problem to be solved. And if they no longer needed me, then maybe it was time to stop being there at all. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, the weight of my father's words pressing down on my chest. "If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father." The sentence played on a loop in my mind, echoing like a cruel lullaby. I thought about the money. For 2 years, I had been sending nearly $6,000 every month to my parents. Rent, electricity, internet bills that no one ever thanked me for, but always expected me to cover. It started as a way to help out, a quiet contribution, because I knew Emma had other things to worry about her job. Our fiancé, her perfect image. But slowly, it became something else. A duty, an invisible contract I had never signed but felt bound to honor. Every month, without fail, I logged into my banking app, transferring the money as if it was just another bill me silence paying for their comfort. That night, in the darkness of my living room, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. My fingers hesitated for a moment over the keyboard. Then I opened the transaction history. Line after line of payments: electricity, water, internet, cable over and over. Month after month, the total at the bottom made my breath catch in my throat. Nearly $16,000. Gone like water down a drain. Not once had they asked if I was okay. Not once had they asked how I was doing, or if I was struggling to keep up. They just assumed like I was a living, breathing safety net. Always there. Always ready to catch them. I hovered over the payment details, my hand trembling just a little. Then I clicked, cancel auto payment. Again and again. For every bill. Each click was like cutting a thread that had bound me to them for far too long. No alarms. No protests. Just silence. The same silence I'd always existed in. When it was done, I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. The room was quiet. The only sound, the low hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I felt nothing. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just a cold, hollow emptiness. Like I'd been hollow for years and was only now realizing it. The next morning, I woke early, made coffee, and walked to work as if nothing had changed. But everything had. For the first time, I felt a strange, quiet freedom. No more bills paid out of guilt. No more buying a place at a table that was never meant for me. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I was done. Done pretending. Done paying. Done apologizing for existing. And if that meant being the daughter who finally said no, then so be it. Emma's engagement party was set for a Saturday afternoon at a beautiful country club on the outskirts of the city. Everyone in the family was talking about it as if it was the event of the year, the perfect venue, the perfect menu, and of course, the perfect couple. I wasn't supposed to be there. My father's words had made that very clear. But fate has a strange sense of humor. A few days before the party, I received an email from HR at my company. One of the new hires was transferring from the New Jersey office to our headquarters in Seattle. His name was Liam Prescott. I stared at the email for a long time. my mind going blank for a moment before it clicked. Liam, Emma's fiancé. Of all the places he could work, of all the people he could end up reporting to, it was me. The sister he'd never heard of. The one who was too inconvenient to mention at the dinner table. I remembered meeting Liam once, months ago at a conference in New York. He had shaken my hand politely, calling me co-founder Warren. But neither of us made the connection. Back then, I hadn't cared enough to look closely. I had no idea he was the same man Emma was going to marry. Now, I was the one who would review his transfer paperwork. I was the one who would decide whether he belonged at Pacific Biosolutions, the company I had built from nothing, the company that rose from the ashes of my first failure. The irony was almost too perfect. The same family that told me to stay away from Emma's big day because I was hard to explain had no idea that the man they were so proud of would be walking into my office on Monday morning. I didn't plan to say anything. I didn't plan to do anything. I just let the transfer go through. Signed off on it with a calm, steady hand. Because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting back at Emma or my parents. It was about me finally realizing that I didn't need their permission to exist. My life didn't have to fit into their perfect picture. It never had. On the day of the party, I stayed home. I brewed a pot of coffee and watched the rain fall outside my window. A quiet reminder of the things I could control. No one called to check on me. No one asked if I was okay. It was as if I had disappeared entirely from the family narrative. And yet, even in my absence, the truth was already making its way to the surface. Monday morning arrived with a soft drizzle, the kind that made the world seem smaller and more hushed. I walked into the office early, the quiet hum of the building greeting me like an old friend. My assistant, Sarah, handed me the final paperwork for the new hire's transfer. I flipped through the pages, each one a confirmation of how far I'd come since those long, lonely nights after my first company failed. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Liam walked into my office. He was dressed sharply in a navy suit, his hair neatly styled, his expression professional and confident until he saw me. "Lina," he said, his voice faltering for just a second. I looked up from the file in front of me, my face calm and unreadable. "Welcome to Pacific Biosolutions." "Liam," I said, "please, have a seat." He hesitated, then sat down across from me, his shoulders tensing as he realized the weight of this moment. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the steady ticking of the clock on the wall, counting down the seconds of this awkward, inevitable encounter. "I didn't realize," he began, but I cut him off gently. "There's no need for explanations," I said. "Your transfer is approved. Let's focus on the work ahead." Liam swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the office at the sleek furniture, the quiet professionalism of the space that was now mine. He looked back at me, his jaw tightening slightly. I didn't know," he said finally, his voice lower. I gave a small nod, my expression unchanged. Most people don't. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something more, but then he just nodded back, his posture stiff. He gathered his folder, thanked me quietly, and left the room. When the door clicked shut behind him, I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were steady. My heart was steady. There was no need for gloating. No rush of triumph. Just a quiet certainty that, for once, I didn't have to explain myself to anyone. I could imagine the look on Emma's face when Liam told her. The shock. The disbelief. The perfect image she had so carefully curated, now cracked by a truth she had never thought important enough to ask about. But I didn't feel like a victor. I didn't feel like I had won anything. I felt free. Free from the weight of their expectations. Free from the need to be seen. And as I looked out the window at the gray morning, I realized that sometimes the greatest power doesn't come from fighting back. It comes from refusing to fight at all. Later that evening, my phone lit up with a message from Emma. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, no texts. No calls. Just silence. But now, her words appeared on my screen like a crack in the calm I'd built around myself. Lina, what did you do? She wrote. Liam told me everything. He said you're his boss. Why? Didn't you ever mention that? Do you realize how this made me look today? I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. For a moment, I thought about the years I had spent trying to make her proud, trying to prove that I was worth something in a family that never saw me. I thought about every time she'd called me the quiet one, or laughed when I talked about my work. I thought about the weight of those years, pressing down on my chest like a stone. It didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the need to defend myself. All I felt was a calm certainty that this conversation wasn't about me at all. It was about her image, her control, her perfect story that didn't have room for a sister who wouldn't play along. I typed out a reply, each word measured and clear. I didn't say anything. Emma. Because it wasn't about me. I wasn't at your party. I didn't say a word to Liam. The truth spoke for itself. A few minutes later, her response came. Faster this time. Sharper. You've always been so selfish. Lina, you've always needed to prove something. You could have told me. You could have helped me prepare. Instead, you let me be blindsided. I read her words and let them sit there, like stones on the surface of a still pond. Then I typed back. Simply, you never asked. That was all. I set the phone down, the screen glowing softly in the darkness of my apartment. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the night cool and quiet. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, the taste of peppermint sharp and clean on my tongue. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her to understand. Because for the first time in my life, I knew that her opinion of me didn't define me. And as I watched the streetlights flicker in the wet pavement below, I felt something settle in my chest, something like peace. The following week, my parents showed up at my apartment, unannounced. It was a gray Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that felt heavy even before they arrived. When I opened the door, my mother was holding a small paper bag, her face lined with fatigue. My father stood beside her, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Hi. Honey, my mother said softly. Can we come in? I stepped back, saying nothing, and let them enter. The air felt thick between us, each step echoing in the quiet of my small living room. I offered them water and we sat down, the three of us forming a fragile triangle around my coffee table. My father cleared his throat first. About Emma's engagement, he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. Things didn't go as planned. I said nothing, my hands resting in my lap. He glanced at my mother, then continued. Emma's been a mess since Liam left. Your mother's been crying for days. Still, I stayed silent. I wasn't sure what they wanted from me. An apology. A promise. A solution. I had no more of those left to give. Finally, my mother spoke. We came to ask for your help, she said. Her voice was careful, measured. You're in a good position now. You're stable. We thought, maybe you could help us with a small monthly contribution, just $2,000. To help us out a bit. I looked at her, then at my father, and felt a small, humorless laugh bubble up in my chest. $2,000 a month, like it was a subscription fee for the daughter they barely tolerated. What about Emma? I asked calmly. Will she be contributing too? My mother hesitated, exchanging a look with my father. She's not doing well right now, she said finally. She needs time. We don't want to pressure her. I nodded slowly, feeling a strange clarity settle over me. So you're here to ask me for money again? I said softly. Even after everything. My father's jaw tightened. We're family, he said, as if that single word should be enough to erase every hurt. Families help each other. I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm and even. I already helped for 2 years. I said, I paid for your electricity, your internet, your water. I never heard a thank you. I never heard an "are you okay?" I was just the one you turned to when you needed something. My mother's eyes grew glossy, but she said nothing. My father looked like he wanted to argue, but the words caught in his throat. Finally, I stood up, the decision already made. If Emma can contribute her share, and if you both agree to sign a written agreement that when you're gone, everything you own will come to me, then I'll consider it. Otherwise, no. My father's face turned red, his voice a sharp crack in the quiet. How dare you put conditions on your own family? I didn't flinch. I'm not putting conditions on family, I said softly. I'm putting conditions on a transaction, because that's what this has always been. For a long moment, no one spoke. My mother finally reached for my father's arm. Let's go, she whispered. He hesitated, then stood up, his face hard. They left without another word, the door clicking shut behind them. I stood in the empty apartment, feeling the silence settle in like an old friend. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. After they left, I sat alone in the stillness of my apartment. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, it was all so quiet, almost soothing. I thought about the day my first company folded, how I had cried alone in a borrowed office space, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Back then, I had called my father, hoping for comfort, for a word of reassurance. But all he said was, I told you so. You should have chosen something simpler, something safe. I remembered that night vividly. The cold concrete floor, the flickering fluorescent lights, the taste of coffee gone bitter hours ago. I remembered how I picked myself up anyway, how I gathered what little pride I had left and decided to try again. Because even if they didn't see it, I knew I wasn't finished. Now, years later, I realized that moment was the start of something bigger. The night I stopped asking for their approval was the night I started building something real for myself. My second company wasn't perfect, but it was mine every late night. Every small victory, every piece of it carved out of a stubborn refusal to give up. And yet, even as I found success, even as the contracts grew bigger and the team expanded, my family never asked. They never asked what it felt like to start over, or how I managed to rebuild. To them, my work was a mystery, an embarrassment best left unspoken. I had always thought that if I just worked hard enough, they would see me, that they would see the woman who refused to stay broken. But the truth was simpler and harder. They never wanted to look, because looking meant admitting that I was more than the quiet, invisible girl they had always seen. As I sat there, memories playing in my mind like an old film, I felt the last threads of obligation slip away. There was no anger, no sorrow, just a gentle finality. I didn't hate them. I didn't want revenge. I just didn't have room for them anymore. I closed my eyes and took a slow, deep breath, feeling the weight lift off my chest. Outside, the rain had started again. A soft patter against the window. It felt like a cleansing, like the world itself was washing away the last traces of who I used to be. I was no longer the girl waiting for permission to exist. I was no longer the safety net they could always rely on. I was just me, and for the first time, that was enough. The next day at work, Liam stopped by my office with a file in his hands. His usual confident air was gone, replaced by a quiet seriousness. He knocked softly before stepping inside. "Lina," he said, his voice low. "I wanted to talk to you about everything." I looked up from my screen and gestured for him to sit. He did, carefully placing the file on my desk. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt different, now no longer heavy. Just honest. "I'm sorry," Liam said finally. His eyes met mine, and there was no trace of arrogance or charm, just a raw sincerity. I didn't know how complicated everything was. I didn't understand what was really happening in your family. I gave a small nod. "It's not something I talk about," I said simply. He took a breath, his shoulders slumping a little. "I ended things with Emma," he said. "After what happened, I realized I was just another part of a story she wanted to tell. But I don't want to be part of that anymore." I didn't react, just listened. This wasn't my burden to fix. "I respect you, Lina," he continued quietly. "The way you've carried yourself through all of this, it's made me see things differently. I wanted you to know that." I looked at him, my expression calm. "Thank you, Liam," I said. "But you don't owe me anything. Just do your job. Well, that's all I ask." He nodded, relief flickering across his face. "I will," he said. When he left, I leaned back in my chair and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The room was quiet, the soft hum of the city drifting in through the window. He felt steady, not triumphant, not vindicated, just steady. That night, I walked home in the soft drizzle of early spring rain. The streets glistened under the streetlights. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I felt like I was walking toward something new. When I reached my apartment, I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the city lights blur in the wet glass. My phone buzzed once. Then again messages from Emma. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I had already said everything I needed to say. I was done trying to prove myself to people who never wanted to see me. I was done carrying the weight of their expectations on my shoulders. And as I sat there, watching the rain wash the city clean, I realized that I was finally free to just be. A week later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. And for a moment, I thought about ignoring it. But something in me said to open the door. So I did. My parents stood there, framed by the doorway. My mother held a small bag, her eyes tired. My father's shoulders were stiff, his expression a mixture of pride and unease. "Can we come in?" "Lina," my mother asked softly. I nodded and stepped aside, letting them in. The air between us felt dense, like the weight of everything unsaid was pressing down on the room. We sat at the kitchen table, the three of us. My mother spoke first, her voice careful. "We wanted to talk about what happened," she said. "We know things have been difficult." I said nothing, waiting. My father cleared his throat. "Emma's been struggling. She says you're the reason Liam left. She says you did it to hurt her." I met his gaze steadily. "I didn't do anything to hurt her," I said quietly. "I didn't do anything at all." My mother's hands twisted in her lap. "We know. We don't know how to fix this. We don't know how to fix us." There was a long pause. I looked at them. Really looked. The lines on my father's face. The worry in my mother's eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them, almost. But I didn't feel like the same daughter I'd been all those years. I didn't feel like I owed them an apology or an explanation. "I don't think this is something you can fix," I said finally, "because it was never really broken. It was always just this." My father flinched slightly, and my mother's eyes filled with tears. But I stayed calm, my voice gentle. I've spent so long trying to make this family work, I said. But I've realized something. Family isn't about paying bills or pretending everything's fine. It's about being seen. It's about respect. And I don't think that's something we can force anymore. My mother nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. My father looked away, his jaw tight. I stood up and opened the door. "Thank you for coming," I said quietly. "But I think this is where we stop trying." They stood, hesitating for a moment. My father looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. My mother just gave a small, sad smile. Then they stepped outside, and I closed the door behind them. I stood there for a moment, my hand on the door, feeling the finality of it all. And then I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. I thought about everything that had led me here, the failures, the silence, the years of trying to belong, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to keep fighting. I didn't feel like I had to explain myself anymore. I didn't feel like I had to prove I was enough. I was enough. So that's my story. Maybe it's not the kind of story you expect, a story without a clear villain or a perfect ending. But it's real. It's honest. And it's mine. If you've ever felt like you were just a backup plan in your own family, if you've ever been the quiet one in a room that never noticed you were there, I hope you know this. You are not alone. You don't have to keep proving your worth to people who can't see it. You don't have to buy your place at a table that was never meant for you. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply walk away. Not out of anger. Not out of bitterness. But because you deserve peace. You deserve to stand in a room and take up space without having to explain why you're there. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you've ever had to choose yourself, even when it was the hardest thing to do. Because somewhere out there, someone might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself too. And if you're still holding on to the hope that one day they'll see you, let me be the one to tell you, you're already enough.